12 assists, 17 points, 4 three-pointers, off the bench. That is what Caitlin Clark just delivered in her USA Basketball Senior National Team debut, and every channel on this platform right now is screaming that Kara Lawson made a catastrophic mistake by not handing her the starting spot. But before you accept that headline, you need to hear what Lawson actually said at the press conference, because the real story is not about a mistake. It is about something far more calculated and far more promising for everything coming next. The backstory here is essential, and most channels are skipping straight past it. Clark had not played a competitive game since July of 2025, when a right groin strain in a matchup against the Connecticut Sun ended her sophomore Indiana Fever season before it ever found its footing. Then, during her recovery window, an ankle sprain compounded the setback and extended the timeline further. 8 months. Not a rough stretch. 8 full months of watching from the bench, conditioning through drills, grinding through 3-on-3 and 5-on-5 scrimmages against practice players, doing everything possible to simulate game conditions without the real thing. Clark herself described it plainly. She was sick of sitting on the bench cheering everybody else on. She said the process taught her things about herself, but she was crystal clear that nothing actually substitutes for competing in a real game environment. If you are here because you want the actual breakdown, not the reaction content, not the misleading headline, hit that like button right now. This analysis goes places the other videos are not going. So when Team USA lined up Wednesday night against Senegal in FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying, and Clark's name appeared in the second unit rather than the starting 5, the internet ignited. Understandably, this is a player who redefined what a point guard looks like in the modern women's game before injury pulled the floor out from under her sophomore season. USA handled Senegal comprehensively. Final score, 110-46. Multiple players hit double figures. And Clark, returning from 8 months away and stepping onto the largest international stage of her career, delivered those 12 assists, 17 points, and 4 three-pointers from off the bench. Statistically, it was a statement. But here is the part the surrounding debate almost entirely missed. Lawson did not just watch the scoreboard. She tracked specific combinations. She identified which lineups manufactured quality shot attempts rather than just shots. She watched which units had defensive rotation chemistry, which groups could push pace and still communicate rotationally in the second and third layers of the scheme. And in her post-game press conference, she named a specific unit, a group she said jump-started the offense in the second quarter, and described it as getting into a good rhythm and generating exactly the kind of look she was looking for. That combination was Clark, alongside KP, Ryan Howard, Monique, and Kiki. And Lawson's framing was deliberate. She pointed out that a great offensive possession does not always end in a made basket. It is the quality of the attempt that tells you whether your system is actually working. That second quarter unit produced the quality she was hunting for, and she flagged it by name in front of the entire press room. That is not how a coach talks after making a mistake. That is how a coach talks after finding exactly what she was looking for. So drop your take in the comments right now. After hearing the actual context, do you still think not starting Clark was a mistake? Or is the rotation decision more layered than the headlines are suggesting? This community has been tracking Clark's comeback for months, and your read on this matters. Here is what makes the competitor narrative genuinely problematic. Multiple channels are running titles claiming Kara Lawson admitted making a huge mistake. You have now seen the press conference evidence. That admission does not exist. When a reporter pressed Lawson directly on the substitution patterns and rotation philosophy, her answer was unambiguous. She told the room not to read a lot into the starting lineup decisions. She confirmed, on record, that starting lineups and rotations are going to change throughout this tournament because she described herself as being in what she called fact-finding mode, not about identifying talent, which she said she already knows, about discovering chemistry, about mapping which combinations have natural flow, which defensive assignments click when the rotations get complex, which lineups produce the most efficient basketball when it counts. That is a championship coach's language. That is a process. It is not a coach walking something back. And before the game even started, Lawson held individual conversations with every player on the roster. When she sat down with Clark specifically, the message she delivered was straightforward: shoot the ball. That was the instruction, not ease back in, not be cautious, shoot. And then at the press conference, she described Clark as one of the most dynamic playmakers in the world, and noted that Clark was now operating alongside the most talented team she had ever been part of. Lawson's point was sharp. Imagine being an elite playmaker and then suddenly having elite finishers and shooters on every side of you. That adjustment, figuring out how to toggle between playmaking and scoring when every teammate around you can also dominate, is its own process. And Lawson said Clark handled it well. And if this kind of breakdown, going past the title and into the actual words, the actual strategy, the actual evidence, is the reason you keep coming back here, consider joining the channel as a member. Your support is what makes this depth of coverage possible, and it is what keeps us going when the stories that matter most need more than a surface-level take. Because what Lawson said in that press conference is genuinely good news for every Clark fan watching this qualifying tournament. Clark herself reported that she was not overly winded. She said the anticipated anxiety of a debut turned out to be less than she expected. The player who entered from the second unit did not look like someone who was carefully reintroduced. She looked like someone who was ready and produced 12 assists in a debut to prove it. Ryan Howard flagged that the group still has defensive work to do, and Lawson echoed that assessment, noting they collected fouls in both first-half quarters before settling into better balance in the second half. That is where this roster still has room to sharpen. Clark's role within that defensive scheme is part of what Lawson is still mapping. The starting lineup question heading into the next game is not really about whether Clark earned it. That answer came Wednesday night with the ball in her hands and 12 assists next to her name. The real question is whether Lawson takes what she identified in that second quarter run: Clark, KP, Ryan, Monique, Kiki clicking together, manufacturing quality, building offensive rhythm, and moves that unit to the front of the rotation. The framework is already there. The evidence is already on tape. Now it is about the decision. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you are here the moment that lineup announcement drops. This qualifying tournament is moving fast. Every game adds new information, and the starting five is still being built in real time. You do not want to be catching up when the rotation finally locks in.